02 Reserve Place in Celebration. Deputies made contact with Anthony in the home along with federal agents and he was immediately detained.
What you have to say to their family?
She woke up that December morning the same way she always did, with her children nearby, the smell of something warm in the kitchen, and a life she had built piece by piece out of pure, stubborn love. Megan had no reason to believe the world was about to end. She had survived hard years, painful years, years that had worn her down to something quieter than she used to be. But she was still here, still making breakfast, still humming something under her breath, still Megan. What happened next, inside that house near the most magical place on earth, would leave an entire nation speechless and leave a family forever erased from the world they deserved to grow old in. Megan Denise Gula Todt was born on January 28, 1977, in New London County, Connecticut. She grew up in Montville, a small, tight-knit town in eastern Connecticut, where neighbors knew your name and the seasons changed slowly and beautifully. She attended Montville High School, where she served as drum major of the marching band and played tennis. Even then, Megan was the kind of person who filled every room she walked into. She wasn't loud about it. She didn't need to be. She had the kind of presence that made people feel steadier simply by being near her. Music was her first language. As a talented singer, flute, and piano player, she shared her passion with her children and was excited about expanding her folk guitar instruction. Those who knew Megan as a teenager remember a girl who was serious about everything she loved, disciplined enough to lead a marching band, competitive enough to play varsity tennis, and warm enough that she never made anyone feel left out. She was, as one family friend later described, the type of person who had it all and somehow remained completely humble about it. After high school, Megan pursued her calling in healthcare. Following her undergraduate studies, she earned her master's degree in physical therapy from Sacred Heart University. She was drawn to healing, to the slow, patient work of helping people regain movement, regain function, regain their lives. It was not glamorous work. It required empathy in large, sustained doses. Megan had that in abundance. It was during her college years that she met Anthony Todt, known to nearly everyone as Tony. According to a college friend named Gina, they adored each other and were high school sweethearts. Tony was charismatic and helpful, the kind of young man who volunteered to mediate roommate conflicts in the residence halls. Megan was the kind of woman who lit up when she talked about her plans for the future. Together, they looked like a couple built to last. After marrying, the Todts purchased a house in Colchester, Connecticut in 2006. They built a life together from the ground up. Tony built a physical therapy clinic named Family Physical Therapy in Colchester, where he and Megan worked together until the birth of their children, when she became a stay-at-home mother. Megan poured everything she had into that role. She was not the kind of mother who simply managed a household. She was the kind who made a household feel like the entire world. Megan was very interested in leading a health-conscious lifestyle for her and her family, and she promoted the importance of being environmentally responsible in her home and her community. Her joy from healthy living brought her closer together with her family. She enjoyed tending to her garden and cooking from scratch with her grandma Gladys and Aunt Cindy, using organic, homegrown ingredients, always joined in the kitchen by Alec and Tyler, These were not just activities, they were the rituals that held the family together. The flower on the counter, the herbs from the garden, the children crowded around the stove, learning that love was something you could make with your hands. Megan always treated others with kindness and patience, and could light up a room with her brilliant smile. Her love of music was pervasive. Most of all, Megan's life was defined by the love she held so strongly for her children. Her entire being was encompassed in her motherhood, and she did whatever she could to support her family. Her 3 children were everything. Alexander Alec Todt was born on September 26, 2006. He was exceptionally bright and gifted in all his pursuits. With striking blue eyes, Alec had a quiet confidence about him. He excelled in his schoolwork, especially English and history. A gifted musician, he played the piano and was learning how to play the violin. At 13, Alec was the kind of boy who thought carefully before he spoke, wise beyond his years, already becoming someone remarkable. Tyler was born on December 30th, 2008, and was the comic relief who loved to make everyone laugh and smile. The young boy was quick to joke and play around, but his carefree nature always carried a concern for others. Tyler excelled in mathematics, was an accomplished piano player, and was learning folk guitar. But he was a hard-working competitor who loved playing soccer with his brother, and they went swimming whenever permitted. At 11, Tyler was the heartbeat of the family, the one who broke every tense moment with a laugh, who made strangers feel like old friends before the conversation was even over. And then there was Zoe. Zoe Todt was full of life and was known to everyone as Princess Zoe. Her beautiful blonde curly hair framed a face that was always laughing and smiling and singing. Zoe loved her time at school and being part of the Montessori Academy of Celebration community. Zoe treasured any moment she got to dance and sing, and she was eager to start her ballet lessons. She also had a musical spirit and wasn't shy about playing her harmonica all around the house. 4 years old, the youngest, the one who had barely begun. With 2 older brothers, she naturally developed a strong personality. When Alec and Tyler went head-to-head, she was never shy to put her hands on her hips and tell them authoritatively, "Now, my boys, stop." Her brothers, like everyone in the family, thought the world of Zoe and would do anything in the world to see her happy and smiling. And then there was Breezy, the family dog, loyal and gentle, who followed the children room to room and slept curled near their feet. The Todt family had relocated to Celebration, Florida, a planned community just miles from Walt Disney World, a neighborhood of manicured lawns and friendly neighbors, and the distant sound of fireworks most nights. It was supposed to be a fresh start. According to Anthony, Megan had contracted Lyme disease after a tick bite during a trip to Walt Disney World in 2017. She then suffered from bouts of depression and became more reserved and isolated. The illness had dimmed something in her, had taken the brightness down several notches. But those who loved her say Megan was still fighting, still present, still the woman who hummed while she cooked and danced with Zoe in the kitchen. A neighbor who met the children in the elevator of their condo building later recalled, according to the family obituary, being struck by how beautifully behaved all 3 of them were, sweet, kind, and always seeming to be on their way somewhere wonderful. Swimming, walking breezy, living a life that looked from every angle like a life worth living. What no one on that street knew, what Megan herself may not have fully understood, was that something was quietly falling apart inside the walls of that home. Not inside Megan, not inside those children, inside the man who shared their last name, inside the man who coached soccer and smiled at neighbors and told everyone that everything was fine. Everything was not fine. And by the time anyone realized it, the Todt family, all of them, would be gone. There is a question that haunts every case like this one, a question that investigators ask, that psychologists debate, that family members lie awake at night trying to answer. How does a man who coaches children's soccer, who volunteers with disabled kids, who posts birthday messages for his son on Facebook, who smiles at neighbors and holds the door open and seems, by every outward measure, to be a devoted husband and father, how does that man become a monster? The answer, in Anthony Todt's case, begins not with him, but with his father. And it begins with a gun, and a child, and a bedroom in Pennsylvania, and a night that no 4-year-old should ever have to survive. Anthony Tony John Todt was born on September 29, 1975, to Robert Todt and Loretta Young Todt in Pennsylvania. By all accounts, the family appeared normal from the outside. Robert Todt was a special education teacher, a man whose professional life was dedicated to helping vulnerable children. He coached wrestling. He was respected in his community. But behind closed doors, Robert Todt was living a double life. He was secretly engaged to another woman. He was romantically involved with a 17-year-old student, and he had decided, with cold and deliberate calculation, that his wife needed to die. Robert Todt was arrested in July 1980 and charged with hiring the brother of one of his former students to shoot and kill his wife, Loretta, in order to marry his mistress. The assassin was a 20-year-old former student named John Chermonte. Not a natural killer, but after a lot of badgering and 2 false starts, he finally took the gun and key Robert Todt gave him, entered the house, and pointed the gun at sleeping Loretta, who awoke and screamed. Loretta survived being shot in the head but lost an eye. Anthony Todt was just 4 years old and was at their Pennsylvania home the night his mother was shot in the face. He was in the house when the gun fired. He was 4 years old when his world split open, when the man he called father became something else entirely, something terrifying. Alan Rubenstein, who as an assistant district attorney helped put Robert Todt in jail, reflected on this later. It's probably tough to realize that your father hired a learning disabled student to kill your mother while you were in the house. Robert was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. Loretta divorced Robert while he was in prison, moved her family to Connecticut, severed all contact between Robert and his children, and remarried. Anthony continued to have nightmares that years of therapy could not erase. He grew up without a father. He grew up knowing that the person who was supposed to protect his mother had instead tried to have her killed. He grew up in the shadow of a violence that had no explanation and no closure, just a bullet fragment lodged in his mother's brain, and a man in prison who said he was innocent. Anthony, who witnessed the attempted murder of his mother, distanced himself from his father in the aftermath. Robert admits that he let Loretta's new husband take up the role of father to Anthony. "I kind of gave up on the position as dad," the elder Todt said. "I had no part in raising him, let's face it." Criminologists who have studied Anthony Todt's case point to this childhood as critically significant, not as an excuse, but as context. Growing up in a home where severe violence was used to solve marital problems may have normalized the idea that extreme acts can reset unbearable situations. While Todt is responsible for his own choices, this background provides context for how lethal problem-solving and secrecy were modeled in his formative years. Despite the trauma, Anthony Todt built a life that looked, on paper, would like a redemption story. He graduated from college. He earned a master's degree in physical therapy from Sacred Heart University, the same university where he met Megan. After a 2-year courtship, Anthony and Megan were married. Together, they started Family Physical Therapy, a clinic in Colchester, Connecticut. He coached youth soccer. He worked with children who had disabilities. On Facebook, Tony Todt presented as a loving father, writing in 2014, "So many reasons to celebrate and be happy today. 8 years ago, this beautiful soul came into our lives and would change our life forever. Happy 8th birthday to my oldest son, Alec. You make us smile every day and make us proud of the person you are." He curated an image with extraordinary care, and for years, many years, that image held, but underneath it, something else was building. The clinic began to struggle. The family's lifestyle, 2 residences, trips to Disney World, a large home in Celebration, cost far more than it earned. And rather than confront that reality, Anthony Todt chose a different path. He began to steal. In April 2019, investigators discovered that Anthony was charging patients for care they had never received. An investigation ensued, which revealed Anthony was using the excess money to pay for the family home in Celebration, as well as trips to Disney World. Anthony had taken additional loans from firms in New York City who sued him for failure to pay. Todt was over $100,000 in debt. Court records show he claimed just $1,500 in assets against at least $200,000 in debts, and he was being evicted from properties in both Connecticut and Florida. His physical therapy license in Connecticut lapsed in September 2019. The Connecticut Attorney General's office had opened a False Claims Act investigation into his business. Federal investigators were closing in. The carefully constructed life, the clinic, the home near Disney World, the Facebook posts, the soccer coaching, the smiling family photographs, was on the verge of total collapse. Todt faced a convergence of pressures, massive debt, looming federal fraud charges, the possible loss of his license and livelihood, and the likely collapse of his carefully maintained image as a successful therapist and family man. Rather than confront bankruptcy, public exposure, and the reality of prison and humiliation, he appears to have chosen an annihilation solution. He began, in the weeks leading up to December 2019, to construct a narrative in his mind, one that would justify what he was already planning. He later told investigators, at various points, that he and Megan had agreed to die together to escape the apocalypse, that they needed to cross to the other side as a family, that he was protecting them from something worse. Psychologists who reviewed the case identified this as consistent with what criminologists call a self-righteous annihilator, a man who reframes mass murder as an act of mercy, who casts himself as protector even as he becomes destroyer. To neighbors, patients, and online acquaintances, Todt appeared as a loving, involved father, posting family photos and attending children's concerts and practices. That image made it difficult for outsiders, and perhaps Megan herself, to link his financial deception to potential lethal danger. In December 2019, with federal agents preparing a warrant for his arrest, with eviction notices filed on the family's Celebration home, with the clinic raided and the fraud exposed, Anthony Todt made his decision. He did not pack a bag. He did not run. He did not confess to Megan or reach out for help, or find any of the 1,000 other ways a person might choose when the walls close in. He stayed. He went home to the woman who had cooked from scratch with their children, to the boy with the quiet blue eyes and the violin, to the 11-year-old who made everyone laugh, to the 4-year-old with blonde curls who played harmonica through the house and told her brothers to behave. He went home to Breezy, sleeping in her dog bed, and he closed the door behind him. The fireworks over Walt Disney World go off almost every night. In Celebration, Florida, the planned community of pastel homes and manicured sidewalks and friendly neighbors built in the shadow of the Magic Kingdom. You can hear them if the wind is right. A distant boom, a celebration of something, the sound of a world that is, in that moment, choosing happiness. In late December 2019, while those fireworks lit up the Florida sky, something unspeakable was happening inside the house at 202 Reserve Place. Something that would not be discovered for weeks. Something so horrifying that when law enforcement finally entered that home, hardened investigators would struggle to find words adequate for what they found. The exact date the murders occurred has never been pinpointed with legal precision, but prosecutors stated the victims were killed sometime after they were last seen in mid-December 2019. What is known, reconstructed painstakingly from Anthony Todt's own confessions, from forensic evidence, from autopsy reports, and from the physical state in which the bodies were eventually found, is a sequence of events almost impossible to comprehend. In his first confession to investigators, delivered on January the 13th and 15th, 2020, Anthony Todt described what happened with a calm that stunned the detectives interviewing him. He did not weep. He did not break down. He spoke, according to those present, as though narrating something that had happened to someone else, as though he were a witness, not the perpetrator. Prosecutors stated at trial that Todt described killing Zoe first, and while she was sleeping, that he rolled over on top of her until she suffocated. He then told investigators that he killed his 2 sons by suffocating them and stabbing them. The detail that prosecutors chose to share with jurors about Tyler, the 11-year-old who loved to make people laugh, who played soccer and swam and made everyone in the room feel lighter, was perhaps the most devastating of all. Todt told investigators he was more concerned about Tyler because Tyler was the fastest, that he was afraid if something didn't go the way he wanted, Tyler would escape. He had thought it through. He had planned for the possibility that his son might run. Autopsy reports later indicated that Megan and the 2 boys, Alexander and Tyler, were drugged with high doses of Benadryl and then stabbed. The boys were stabbed post-mortem, and all 3 children were likely suffocated or strangled before or during the assault. The medical examiner's office concluded the 4 were killed by unspecified violence combined with overdoses of Benadryl. Megan was stabbed twice in the stomach, while each of the 2 boys sustained a single wound to the abdomen. Zoe, the youngest, just 4 years old, had no obvious stab wounds. She was the first to go. She never woke up. Todt also told investigators that after the children were dead, his wife then stabbed herself twice, and when that didn't work, he suffocated her with a pillow. Finally, he claimed, he suffocated the family dog. After it was over, after Megan and Alec and Tyler and Zoe and Breezy were all gone, Anthony Todt did not call for help. He did not call 911. He did not knock on a neighbor's door. He did not drive to a police station or a hospital or a church. He consumed a large quantity of Benadryl, which he later described as a suicide attempt, and then he stayed. He stayed in that house, in that home that had once smelled of organic cooking and guitar music and a child playing harmonica down the hall. He stayed as the days passed, as December became January, as the Florida sun rose and set outside windows that no one opened, the prolonged period living with the bodies, sharing a bed with his dead wife and child, and maintaining a quasi-normal routine inside a decomposing crime scene suggests a deep psychological disconnection from reality and a desire to maintain the illusion of family togetherness even after annihilation. Meanwhile, the outside world began to notice something was wrong. The Todt family was last heard from via text messages on January 6, 2020. Family members, scattered across Connecticut and elsewhere, began exchanging worried messages. They had been told the family had the flu, that they were unwell, that they needed rest, but the days stretched on, and the phone calls went unanswered, and something, a quiet, terrible instinct, told people who loved Megan and her children that something was not right. A family member asked for a welfare check on December 29, 2019, after not hearing from them for 2 days. Deputies responded to the home, but left after being unable to communicate with anyone inside. They did not force entry. They saw nothing obviously suspicious from the outside. No broken windows, no signs of disturbance. They knocked, no one answered, and they left. It was one of the most consequential decisions in the entire case, and it was made by officers who had no way of knowing what was happening on the other side of that door. Concerned family members created a Facebook page called Looking for the Todt Family. It quickly swelled to nearly 2,500 members. People who had known Megan since childhood posted her photograph. Friends from Montville, from Sacred Heart University, from the neighborhood in Colchester, shared memories and urged anyone with information to come forward. The page had the desperate, urgent energy of people who sensed, without being able to say why, that something irreversible had already happened. Despite the family's continued presence in Florida, mail piled up on the porch of the home, and an eviction notice was placed on the door. From the outside, the 202 Reserve Place looked like the home of a family that had simply left, packed up and gone somewhere. A car in the driveway, curtains drawn, nothing overtly alarming, just silence and mail, and a notice that no one came to collect. Inside, the bodies of Megan, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe Todt were decomposing. Investigators from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and Osceola County deputies returned on January 13, 2020, after disturbing cell phone texts began appearing on family members' phones from Anthony Todt. The texts were strange, disjointed. They did not sound like a man who was sick with the flu. They sounded like a man who was unraveling. Federal agents and local deputies arrived at the home together. The federal agents there to execute an arrest warrant for healthcare fraud, the deputies there as backup, and they rang the bell. No answer. They tried the front door and found it unlocked. They stepped inside. They immediately noticed an odor they recognized. It was the smell of decomposing flesh. Following sounds from the second floor, they encountered Tony walking unsteadily toward the stairway. An arrest affidavit noted that Anthony could barely stand and appeared to be shaking. He was mumbling as authorities searched the house. When investigators asked where his family was, he told them his wife was upstairs sleeping. They told him to stay where he was, and they went upstairs. In beds throughout the house, family members were discovered, stabbed in their stomachs, and smothered to death, with crucifixes gripped in their hands. In the master bedroom, Megan's body was wrapped in blankets. Across the end of the bed lay 4-year-old Zoe, similarly wrapped. Zoe Todt had decomposed to the point that authorities initially couldn't find her until they examined Megan's corpse and saw Zoe's body beneath her feet. The family dog, Breezy, was lying dead on the floor in her dog bed in the master bedroom. Every one of them had a crucifix placed in their hands, as though someone had tried to make it look peaceful, as though someone had tried to make it look like love. The Osceola County Sheriff's Office issued a brief statement that afternoon. There had been a death investigation in the North Village area of Celebration. It said almost nothing. It did not need to. The community of 2,500 people on that Facebook page, who had been searching and hoping and praying for 3 weeks, began to understand. They were not missing. They had been there the whole time. And the man who had placed rosaries in their hands and tucked them under blankets was standing at the bottom of the stairs, shaking when the officers arrived, alive while his children were not. On the morning of January 13, 2020, as federal agents and Osceola County deputies drove toward 202 Reserve Place in Celebration, Florida, they were not thinking about murder. They were there to serve an arrest warrant for healthcare fraud, a white-collar crime, a paperwork offense, the kind of case that ends in plea deals and restitution payments, and at worst, a few years in a federal facility. They knocked on the door of a man they expected to find embarrassed, perhaps defiant, perhaps ready to lawyer up. They were not prepared for what was waiting on the other side. What followed in those first hours, and across the 2 years of investigation, hearings, and trial that came after, was one of the most disturbing cases in Florida's modern criminal history. The moment agents entered the house and encountered Anthony Todt at the top of the stairs, barely able to stand, mumbling, the nature of the situation shifted immediately. The bodies of the victims, decomposing, wrapped in blankets, were found with stab wounds and toxic amounts of Benadryl in their systems, the crucifixes in their hands. Breezy, dead in her dog bed, the smell of weeks of decomposition filling every room. Anthony Todt was taken into custody at the scene and transported to a hospital where he was treated for a Benadryl overdose. In January 2020, Todt was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of animal cruelty in Osceola County, initially facing the death penalty. What investigators faced in the immediate aftermath was a deeply complicated evidential challenge. The bodies had been decomposing for weeks. The medical examiner's ability to establish precise cause and timeline of death was significantly compromised. The prosecution would later note that the determination of some specifics couldn't be made because the bodies had been left at the home for more than 3 weeks. Every day Anthony Todt had remained in that house with his family had degraded the evidence, making the path to justice harder. But what investigators did have was extraordinary. They had the killer himself, who, in the hours and days immediately following his arrest, began to talk. After his arrest, Todt told detectives that everybody needed to die in order to pass over to the other side together because the apocalypse was coming. He spoke in detail about what had happened in that house. He told investigators about Zoe, about Tyler, about Alec, about Megan. He described the sequence of events with an eerie specificity that investigators recorded, preserved, and would later present to a jury. The jury at trial watched a taped recording of this confession, Anthony Todt's own voice, describing what he had done to his wife and children. But then, 6 months later, everything changed. In June 2020, Anthony Todt wrote a 27-page letter to his father from the Osceola County Jail. The letter was scanned by jail officials before being mailed, standard procedure, and a copy was later obtained by the Orlando Sentinel through a public records request. In the letter, Todt blamed his wife for the murders, writing that Megan had given the children a Benadryl-laced pie before stabbing and suffocating them. He described coming home to find the children dead, finding Megan still alive, and watching her stab herself. He claimed he had tried CPR. He claimed he had attempted suicide 8 times afterward. He wrote that he tried to kill himself after each confession and failed repeatedly. It was a story that changed the entire shape of the defense. And it was a story that prosecutors, forensic experts, and ultimately 12 jurors found to be not credible. The defense honed in on the medical examiner's testimony that the stab wounds appeared to have happened after death, arguing that this contradicted Todt's original confession that he had stabbed them first. Defense attorneys argued that his confession had been taken while he was severely impaired by a Benadryl overdose, that nothing he said in those initial hours should be trusted. In a motion filed after conviction, Todt's attorneys stated they would seek to have several of Judge Keith Carston's rulings reviewed, including the fact that the defense was not allowed to discuss Todt's mental health at trial. The trial itself began in early April 2022, more than 2 years after the discovery of the bodies. Prosecutors showed evidence of Todt's severe financial problems, the victim's Benadryl toxicology, and the contradictions between what Todt had said at various points and what the physical evidence showed. The eviction notices, the debt exceeding $200,000, the lapsed license, the federal fraud investigation closing in, the complete absence of any exit plan other than annihilation. Assistant State Attorney Danielle Pinnell told the jury in her opening statement that Todt had described to investigators that he killed Zoe first, then his 2 sons, then Megan, painting a picture of a man who executed his family methodically while his children slept. On Wednesday, April 13th, 2022, Anthony Todt took the stand in his own defense. It was a decision that legal analysts described as remarkable and ultimately devastating. He told jurors he did not kill his family, maintaining the version of events in his jailhouse letter. "I love my wife. I love my children. I was not there the night my children died," he said. He also told the court he had tried to take his own life at least 8 times using Benadryl. "I remember at least 8 times," he said. "I just wanted to be with my family." The prosecution responded in closing arguments with a theme that cut through every defense claim and every shifting story. "The reason why we're here today is control," Assistant State Attorney Pinnell told the jury. The defendant wanted control. Prosecutors told jurors that Todt had said they brought the children into this world and that they should be in control of when they leave it. The jury deliberated. At one point, they sent word that they were deadlocked, and the courtroom held its breath. The judge read what is called the Allen charge, an instruction allowing jurors in the minority opinion to reconsider their positions. The jury went back, and then, at around 6:50 p.m. on April 14, 2022, jurors returned with their verdict. Guilty. Count 1, first-degree murder. Count 2, first-degree murder. Count 3, first-degree murder. Count 4, first-degree murder. Count 5, cruelty to animals. A 12-member jury found Anthony Todt guilty on all 5 counts. After the verdict was read, Anthony Todt was permitted to address the court. "I maintain my innocence," he said. "I love my wife. I love my children. I was not there the night my children died." He had not changed his story. He would not change it. Then Circuit Judge Keith Karsten spoke. He sentenced Anthony Todt to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, a plus an additional year for the killing of Breezy. And before pronouncing sentence, he looked at the man standing before him and said words that have since echoed across every account of this case. "A jury has unanimously determined, after listening to the evidence, that you, Anthony John Todt, are a destroyer of worlds." In the gallery, Megan's family wept. Cynthia Kopko, Megan Todt's aunt and godmother to the children, whom she called Alexander, Tyler Bear, and Princess Zoe, addressed the court. "We loved Megan and the kids very, very much, and all I have is pictures and memories to hold in my heart. My parents miss them, and his parents miss them, and our families miss them very, very much." State Attorney Monique Worrell, in announcing the conviction, said, "There are no words that adequately express the utter tragedy that is this case. This verdict brings a painful chapter in our community to a close. I know that this result cannot ease the suffering of those who loved Megan, Zoe, Alexander, and Tyler Todt. Justice had been delivered, but justice in a case like this is a complicated word. It closes a chapter. It does not restore what was lost. It does not bring back the boy with striking blue eyes, or the 11-year-old who was afraid of nothing except maybe not making everyone laugh hard enough. It does not bring back the little girl with curly blonde hair who played harmonica through the house and put her hands on her hips and told her brothers to behave. It does not bring back the woman who grew organic herbs in her garden and sang while she cooked and lit up every room she walked into. The verdict was just. The sentence was just. And Megan, Alec, Tyler, Zoe, and Breezy were still gone. There is a moment in every true crime story where the cameras stop rolling and the courtroom empties and the reporters file their final pieces and the world moves on to the next tragedy. Justice has been served, at least in the legal sense, and the case is closed. But for the people who loved Megan Todt, for the childhood friends who grew up with her on the streets of Montville, Connecticut, for the neighbors who remembered her children swimming in the community pool and walking Breezy down sun-warmed sidewalks, the story did not end. It simply changed shape. It became something they carry every day, and quietly, in whatever way grief eventually settles into a life. Megan's family received the verdict not with celebration, but with the complicated, exhausted relief of people who have been holding their breath for 2 years. Kirsten Lewis, a childhood friend of Megan Todt, reflected on the trial with a sorrow that had not diminished with the verdict. "It made me angry that he was turning everything on Megan, and she couldn't stand up for herself," she said. "Also, I was frustrated with the prosecution because they didn't call any character witnesses. I felt like her voice was completely strangled." That phrase, "her voice was completely strangled," captures something essential about this case. The man who killed Megan spent 2 years trying to use her death as a defense. He put her name on the murder of her own children. He sat in a courtroom and looked at a jury and said the woman who grew herbs in her garden and sang while she cooked and homeschooled her children and loved them with everything she had, that woman had poisoned them with a Benadryl pie. He tried to take from her, in death, the last thing she had left, her character. The jury rejected it. The judge called him a destroyer of worlds. But the anger remains. among her friends, among those who knew her, that Megan could not speak for herself, that the woman who lit up every room she entered had to be defended from beyond the grave. Christina Garrity, whose 12-year-old son had been friends with Alec and Tyler Todt, told the Orlando Sentinel after the verdict that the experience had deeply affected her child. She said there was some relief when Anthony Todt was convicted, but that the process had been difficult to witness and harder still to explain. Children who had known Alec and Tyler, who had played with them, laughed with them, shared ordinary moments of childhood with them, were now navigating an incomprehensible loss at an age when they barely had the tools for it. The community of celebration itself has carried the weight of what happened within its borders. This was a neighborhood designed for happiness, planned and built, and marketed as a place where families could flourish in the shadow of the most magical place on earth. What the Todt case revealed is that the most dangerous threats to a family do not always come from outside. They come from inside, from behind closed doors, from the person who shares your last name and your bed, and the breakfast table where your children sit every morning. In the broader world, the Todt case ignited serious conversation about a phenomenon that criminologists call family annihilation, the murder of an entire family unit, typically by the husband and father. The case highlights a critical blind spot. White-collar crime and financial collapse are rarely viewed by law enforcement as potential triggers for extreme domestic violence. Federal agencies were investigating Todt for significant Medicaid and insurance fraud, knew he was deeply in debt and living beyond his means. Yet there was no indication that this financial collapse and impending arrest were systematically viewed as a potential trigger for lethal danger to his family. This gap between the investigators pursuing the financial crime and any mechanism for alerting a family that the man they lived with was on the edge of catastrophic violence remains an open and troubling question. Megan Todt, according to investigators, had no knowledge of the fraud. She did not know the walls were closing in. She had no reason to take her children and leave. She trusted her husband, and that trust cost her everything. The case also illustrates how effectively family annihilators conceal themselves. To neighbors, patients, and online acquaintances, Todt appeared as a loving, involved father, posting family photos, attending children's concerts and practices. That carefully maintained image made it nearly impossible for outsiders, and perhaps Megan herself, and to connect his financial deception to potential lethal danger. As for Anthony Todt, the destroyer of worlds, he has not been quiet from behind bars. He is currently serving his life sentence at the Santa Rosa Correctional Institution Annex in Milton, Florida, in the Panhandle, described as one of the toughest and most dangerous prisons in the state. In 2024, Todt filed suit against the Osceola County Sheriff's Office and other officials, alleging the unauthorized release of the personal letter he had written to his father, the same letter in which he blamed Megan for murdering her own children. He is reportedly representing himself. He continues to maintain his innocence. He has not stopped talking. The contrast is almost too painful to sit with. Megan Todt cannot speak. Alec cannot speak. Tyler cannot speak. Zoe, 4 years old, blonde curls, harmonica playing, hand on hips, now my boys, stop, cannot speak. And the man who silenced them is filing civil lawsuits from a prison in the Florida Panhandle, still constructing narratives, still seeking some version of the story in which he is not the villain. The Connecticut newspaper The Day produced a podcast called Looking for the Todt Family. following the case from the initial disappearance through the full trial, an attempt to give this story the depth and care it deserved. The Crime Junkie podcast devoted an episode to the case. Investigators and criminologists have cited it in academic discussions of family annihilation and the warning signs that systems fail to recognize in time. But the most lasting memorial to Megan and her children is not a podcast or a court verdict or a judge's words. It is the way the people who knew them speak about them. The childhood friend who was a co-drum major with Megan at Montville High School who still thinks of her. The neighbors in celebration who remembered seeing Alec, Tyler, and Zoe in the elevator, always so sweet and polite, always on their way somewhere. The family members who gathered in a Facebook group and searched and prayed and refused to stop looking, even when they feared the worst. The family's obituary, written by those who loved them, described Megan as having an exciting zest for life and learning, and giving her children that same enthusiastic curiosity for the world around them. They will be forever loved and greatly missed, and their adored family and friends will never let them be forgotten. Never let them be forgotten. It is the simplest and most powerful thing that can be said. Megan Denise Gula Todt was born in January, in the cold of a Connecticut winter, to a family that loved her. She grew up playing flute and tennis and leading a marching band. She became a healer. She built a home and a garden and a family, and she raised 3 children who were becoming extraordinary people. A quiet, blue-eyed boy with a violin, a laughing, fast-running boy with a piano, a tiny girl with curly hair and a harmonica and all the authority in the world. She cooked from scratch. She sang. She believed in organic gardens and environmental responsibility, and the astonishing, ordinary miracle of feeding your children food you grew yourself. She deserved to grow old. She deserved to see Alec perform with his violin, and Tyler win a soccer match, and Zoe begin her ballet lessons. She deserved a Thursday afternoon and a Saturday morning, and every quiet, unremarkable day that stretches out ahead of a life that is still being lived. The world is darker without her in it, without all of them in it. Her name was Megan. His name was Alec. His name was Tyler. Her name was Zoe. They deserved every tomorrow that was taken from them, and the world will not forget.